Alright, hey everyone out there in guitar land, Mike Heading here. Got a little mini lesson for you today. I want to talk about where do melody notes come from. So this is really important if you want to play bluegrass, because bluegrass improvisation and solos are usually based on playing the melody. So I get a lot of questions from students, they're in a jam session and someone throws a new song they've never heard and they get overwhelmed. They don't know where to start looking for the melody, right? So this is an important topic. If you can hone down and narrow down where to start looking for that melody, you can start creating your own solos to songs you've never heard. The other place where this is really applicable is people maybe coming from like a rock guitar background where all their solos, maybe they use like minor pentatonic, and again, that can have a really cool sound, but it can also get a little bit repetitive if you're just taking a minor pentatonic solo on every song. You're not incorporating enough of the melody to make the song kind of stand out on its own. Every solo kind of just starts to sound the same. So it's really important if you want to play bluegrass or folk music to be able to find the melody and then create an improvisation based on the melody. So let's jump into this lesson. Here we go. Okay, so real quick before we start playing, let's just go over a little bit of music theory. We need to understand two concepts: chord tones and passing tones. Okay, so really easy. The chord tones are just going to be the notes that make up a chord. So whatever chord you play, obviously if you strum them all at once, you're going to kind of hear a chord, but if you play each note individually, those are called the chord tones. So it kind of makes sense if you think about it. The chord tones are just the notes. If you play them together, it builds a chord, right? So if I play them all at once, you hear a C chord. If I play them individually, those are the chord tones. In this case, we have C, E, and G. And you don't even have to remember what those names are if you don't want to. All you have to do is just remember, put down the chord, whatever chord you're playing, any version of C right? Each of those notes is going to be a chord tone, okay? So that's really important, okay? So just remember that. The chord tones are the notes, the tones that build a chord. The other notes are called passing tones. So those can be other notes in the scale. So if you play like a C major scale, you'll see you have those chord tones: passing tone, chord tone, passing tone, chord tone, passing tone, passing tone, chord tone, right? So you can see that scale is made up of a combination of chord tones and passing tones. Passing tones could also be like notes outside of the scale, right? So like, so that would technically be a passing tone as well. Basically, passing tones are just notes that don't build the chord. You can obviously get more specific. You could call them, there can be scale passing tones or chromatic passing tones, but the idea is the same. It's just those are notes that are outside of the chord, okay? So that's the concept you need to remember, is chord tones and passing tones. So melodies, common bluegrass and folk melodies, are going to be made up of a combination of mainly chord tones, and this is why it's important to know the chord tones, because it gives you a spot to start looking. So the melodies are mainly going to be made up of chord tones and then connecting with passing tones, okay? So that's really important. One, almost all the melodies are going to start on a chord tone, right? So even if I just guess one of those three notes as a spot to start my solo, I have a 33% chance of guessing the right one. The other thing is, if I start on one of the other ones, it's just going to sound like an improvisation because I'm using a chord tone. So again, I might play something like this to start a little melody. I'm going to start on one of those three notes, and then I'm going to use little passing tones in between. So I'll kind of connect the chord tones with little passing tones, and I'll just make up a little melody. Nothing fancy, but it's just a spot to start, right? Again, nothing fancy, but I'm just, again, playing around with that idea of mainly highlighting the chord tones and then using little passing tones in between. So that's one example. Another example we could do is like, So you can kind of hear how I'm just starting to create a little melody based on using those chord tones and passing tones. So my best analogy for understanding this concept, I think that I've come up with, that at least makes sense to me, hopefully it'll make sense to you as well, is this concept of chord tones and passing tones. Is think of one of those big fake rock climbing walls. If you've ever seen one of those, at a gym with they have all those fake little nubs that you can grab onto to climb up, right? And some of the nubs are really big and some of them are really tiny depending on the difficulty of the climb, right? So hopefully you've seen those before and you can picture that. But this analogy works really well for this chord tones and passing tones concept. So imagine those chord tones, those safe notes, are those really big, easy to grab onto spots on the rock climbing wall, right? You can grab onto those really easily and they're very safe and you can grab onto them, again, very easily, right? The passing tones are going to be smaller, right? You're going to want to jump and, grab onto that, but only briefly to where you're grabbing onto then a stronger chord tone, right? If you take a note completely outside of the scale, right, that's going to be even the smallest little nub. You're really not going to be able to hold on to that one very long, right, before getting back to a safer spot. So that's kind of the analogy, I think, that, again, so you can understand that chord tones are the safe spots to hang out. But again, if you just always go to the safe spots, that's not going to be very interesting and very fun, right? So eventually you're going to want to spice it up and grab onto some smaller little holds, right, passing tones, because that's going to make your melodies more advanced. But the concept of starting and ending on those chord tones still applies, and they're going to be the main notes that we want to use, okay? So that's what we can think of when we're playing on a single chord. So how do we incorporate some other chords, right? So more songs are going to have more than one chord. So what we do when we add other chords is we just apply this same concept, right? So let's say we add an F chord to our little melody. Now we play our F chord and we use one of those chord tones to play over the F. And we can still use our passing tones from the same scale, our C major scale in this case. As you get more advanced, your passing tones might get different, but the simplest form is just think of these as the chord tones for F and then highlight those. So maybe I go, let's say I'm doing a little solo now from C to F. So maybe I start on a chord tone of C. Now when I hit a chord tone of F, you're going to hear that change, right? So something like this. Maybe on F I do something like this. C, back to C, land on a chord tone. Now maybe I go to G, right? So G chord tones can be that chord, it could be this chord here, right? So I have different options, but all those open strings are now chord tones. So maybe I do something on a G like this. So I'm on C. Now G chord tone. And I threw in a couple little passing tones there, but you can see again, the same concept. Now I'm just highlighting the chord tones on G. So it really helps your ear hear those changes. Let's say I add an A minor. So now I land on a chord tone of A minor. F, C, G. So the other thing I'm doing there you can hear just to spice up those chord tones is like little hammer-ons. Stuff like that, or slide into the notes. So again, I'm just adding those little ornaments, but that same concept still applies, right? So I'm playing out of those shapes. I'm thinking that you might also hear that term, playing out of the chord shape. That's another common like bluegrass or jazz terminology. You're thinking in terms of this chord shape or this, whatever chord you're playing, I'm thinking in that shape, right? So even if I play a C up here like this, right, some other version of C, you can think in terms of the scale, but I really want to highlight those chord tones as my starting spot for my melody. I don't want to land on a passing tone on a C, like let's say I did this, You know, something like, you know, I hit that note, but I play it over a C chord. Again, it's going to have like a jazzy kind of outside of the chord tone sound, which can be cool. But again, for bluegrass, your melody is mainly going to start on one of those chord tones. You know, something like "Will the Circle Be Unbroken," right? Right, so I'm starting on a chord tone down here, chord tone, passing tone, chord tone, chord tone, chord tone, passing tone, chord tone, right? So again, all that same exact concept applies. Now I go to an F chord here, so I'm playing that note, but I'm changing to an F. Passing tone, chord tone, and then back down to C, chord tone, right? And then you know, so again, when I went, that's all C, chord tones, and then G, chord tone, passing tone. So the chord tones and passing tones change depending on what chord you're on. So that gets a little confusing, but an example of that is here, right? So this note, second fret on the 4th string, is a chord tone in C. But if I play a G, that note now becomes a passing tone back, right? So again, the chord tones change based on the underlying chord you're on, right? So same concept works with minor, right? If you're doing C minor, your melody is still going to start probably on one of those notes. Whatever chord you're doing, D, major. You know, you're just finding where those notes are, and that's where I'm going to highlight one of those notes to start. Maybe go down to C, right? So I land there, chord tone. This concept of landing on the chord tones when the chords change, that can also be called playing the changes, right? So the listener's really going to hear that the chord changed in your lead playing, which is very powerful. You're not just playing a pentatonic scale over top of it while the chords change. You're actually playing the changes. So I don't expect you to understand this all overnight. Obviously, you're going to have to digest some of this slowly. As your ear gets better, you're going to start to hear those chord tones, and you might even be able to pick out which of the 3 chord tones the melody is starting on. But like I said, even if you just use that concept of starting on one of the chord tones in G, right? Now I have a spot to look. So for example, I could take my G chord, right? So I could play it this way, or I could play it this way, which is just like your F chord moved up, right? So if I use my chord tone concept, I'm going to start my solo on one of those notes. To make it sound a little bluegrassy, all I'll do is just slide into it. So now I have something like this. Or right? That could, all 3 of those could be a start to a little solo, you know, something like C, G, back to G, chord tone, D, right, chord tone, G, chord tone, outside passing tone, C, chord tone, right? Passing tone's there, but I just played a little lick. But I'm still thinking out of that chord shape. The other thing that's cool about that is if I'm thinking out of that chord shape, I can kind of play notes that are more outside of the scale. And again, I'm just doing that for example, right? But I immediately snap back into that shape, and your ear kind of connects back to that chord. So it actually gives you a little more freedom to play kind of outside of the scale really quickly, and then you're back to where it's more pleasing to the ear. Okay, and lastly, real quick, I know we talked about this playing up here, but the same concept still applies, right? Up here, right? So if I play this C way up here, you still want to think of, I'm playing in that chord shape, and where are my other passing tones? So, because I think it's easy to, you can kind of understand the concept down here, but sometimes when you go up here and play up higher positions, people start thinking in scales, which is okay. Again, your scale is where your other passing notes are coming from, right? But you still want to see this underlying chord shape here, because that's where my melody notes are probably going to start, right? You know, I can go to this F here, right? C. Even if I go to A minor or something down here, right? You know, again, you just want to you want to find those chord shapes within whatever lead line you're playing. So another good exercise you could do it the opposite way. Let's say you know some solo up here that you've been practicing, but you don't really know where it connects to. See if you can find, you know, if it's like a D minor or something, see if you can find that chord that goes along with that shape that you're playing out of. Because the other thing that's really cool about that is then you could be playing like a little rhythm. If I have that shape, then my lead and chords become kind of seamless, right? That's a huge thing in bluegrass, right? You know, I'm kind of basically just keeping my strumming going, and now I'm throwing in those chord tones and passing tone. I mean, that's a big kind of part of like Carter style, that kind of like... that kind of style, right? Again, I'm thinking in that chord shape. So I found through a lot of trial and error, this was a big learning experience for me. I used to go to bluegrass jams, and every solo I would take was just kind of this off-the-wall improvisation. And again, people would kind of be like, oh, that was okay, you know. But if you play a solo or an improvisation based on the melody, people are going to clap. The listener is going to enjoy hearing that melody so much more than just hearing a random improvisation. So really try and connect your solos to that melody of the song. That's really important. All right, hopefully that helps you out, gives you some stuff to practice. Good luck and keep picking. You got this.